Good evening. Welcome to tonight's On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers. Tonight's show is 2 hours long and live, so if you have any questions for my guests during the show, text them to 87778 with the word EDGE, a space, and then your name, location, and your message, and we'll try to pick up at any that really hit the mark. They're all charged at a standard rate, so why not get ready to text? It's likely that many who tune into this show on a regular basis are not convinced by the official story of 9/11, i.e. that 19 Muslim hijackers, armed only with box cutters, hijacked 4 planes and flew 2 of them into the Twin Towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and the 4th into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It's also fairly likely that many of those same viewers feel the Twin Towers and the 47-story Building 7, which collapsed into its own footprint late in the afternoon of 9/11, were brought down using explosives, perhaps thermite, thermate, or even nanothermate. However, my 2 guests tonight, supported by careful analysis of the film evidence and extraordinary evidence from independent scientist John Hutchison, who sadly cannot be with us tonight, believe that at the very least the Twin Towers were more likely to have been brought down by directed energy weapons. They believe that the buildings were literally turned to dust, including most of the structural steel, and simply blew away, leaving the site polluted by extremely weird effects, even now, over 8 years later. Even more controversially, they believe that the Twin Towers were not hit by passenger jets at all, and that the filmed evidence we have all seen contradicts Newtonian physics and is therefore impossible. My guests tonight are researcher Andrew Johnson from checktheevidence.com, who is here in the studio, and Professor of Mechanical Engineering Dr. Judy Wood from drjudywood.com, who is online from the USA via Skype video. What a show we've got tonight! Andrew, I'll say welcome to you first.
Thank you very much, Theo, and I really appreciate the invite onto the programme.
Not at all. And I'll say hello to Dr. Judy Wood. Hopefully she's online.
Hello.
Hello. We can't see you for some reason. Ah, there we are. We can see you. Excellent. So I think I'll start with you, Dr. Judy Wood, if I may, because I think you were the person who first came out and spoke about this evidence in the way that you speak about it. If you want to give me just a quick description of how you came to the understanding that you've come to about what happened on 9/11, I'd really appreciate that.
Well, when my eyes and ears don't agree, I tune out my ears and just use my eyes. And that happened pretty immediately on 9/11. And I just independently thought through it, but wondered why nobody else was. And that always leaves you uncomfortable because you kind of like to go with the herd. But the herd didn't make sense, and I proved it over and over again to myself. And then I began looking at the evidence and just going through as many photographs as I could get a hold of. And sort of imagining I was there, feeling it, smelling it, tasting it, standing in it. I got to know where every piece of debris is, sort of reliving it through all the photographs. And it wasn't just depending on one photograph. I would have photographs from like 5 different sources that all would say the same thing. They're all in agreement. And the evidence, I believe that if you let the evidence speak to you and you listen to it, it'll tell you exactly what happened. And I learned about energy weapons. I didn't know such things existed, but the evidence told me they did. And after looking at all the evidence and categorizing it, I happened upon John Hutchison's website, and by golly, every single one of the same phenomena were reproduced, which is very striking and scary. And I think I remember telling Andrew about it then, and Andrew was familiar with John at the time, though I wasn't, and all of the dots connected. It was pretty amazing. I'm not saying that it is the Hutchison effect, but it's the same type of physics involved in both.
Well,
And John Hutchison's examples are sort of a proof of concept of this type of physics.
okay. Let me just get Andrew into the room again, if I may. So, Andrew, you've been working with Dr. Judy Wood, haven't you, on this? So, again, this is a journey of discovery for you. I know you've been to America and spoken in public with her and been on radio shows and spoken a lot in the UK about this. And I know you've also faced a lot of opposition from people who think they know the answers. I mean, how do you deal with that criticism?
Well, you know, I just use the phrase that's the title of my website. As Dr. Wood just said, check the evidence. And if you keep looking at the evidence, you can rule out, you know, certain things that could not have happened. And that's what I tried to do all along. And I realised that my early assumptions about 9/11 were mistaken. And I found out that there was yet another backstory, you know, beneath the one which was said to explain the anomalies. And when you actually look at that story with the explosions in the towers and this sort of thing, it just doesn't explain the evidence. It explains some of it, but it doesn't explain enough of it.
All right, well, I think what we should do is we should go to a film we've got of the impact on the second tower of how it becomes dustified. So if we can go to that dustified film, please.
To see this now, but if you look at the pieces that are coming down, you can actually see some of the pieces turning to dust.
Those spikes in the middle there.
Yeah, and this particularly is the smoking gun evidence, which I think you'll find a lot of people not happy talking about. This is about 70 columns of unsupported steel turning to dust before your very eyes, and I've got about 3 or 4 clips that I edited together so that you can see this from different angles, and we also have a still image sequence showing the same thing. So, you know, what can turn steel to dust? The only thing that I know that can turn steel to dust is a file. Explosives don't turn steel to dust.
No, they just break it up, don't they?
Correct.
Or bend it.
Into chunks. But in this sequence, you can see the tower and the actual 70-column story of, you know, steel turning to dust before your eyes.
Okay, here we go again. This is the last tower to go down, which is I think...
tower number 1, I think, went second, didn't it?
Yeah, is it tower number 1? Is that the one that was hit first?
It was hit first and went down second.
It went last, okay,
Yeah.
tower 1. And we can see the spikes of steel there that were left standing briefly.
Yes, the next clip is slightly even clearer than this. He zooms in on camera on this particular clip, but then the next one you can see from a sort of sky as the background. Yeah, because that particular one had a dusty background, and this next one will have a sky as a background.
This is the best one of all, isn't it?
This one coming up after this, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's the one, yes.
And you'll
look
see
at the speed of it. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yes. So really, I encourage people to go and study this for themselves.
Here we go.
If
Let's just concentrate on these steels that are left standing, steel columns that apparently, according to you, turn to dust.
Wow.
No longer is Chris.
There we go. Judy, we're just watching the steel that's left standing briefly turning to dust, or apparently turning to dust, as the second.
There's a particular moment when the outside edges of that are no longer discrete edges. You'll notice when it becomes not, you know, a solid air interface, but it just becomes mist. It's pretty interesting.
It is quite extraordinary, isn't it, how that seemed to happen. I think we've also got some pictures, some still pictures of the, of the scene after the collapse, and it doesn't seem to be any debris, or very little debris. If we go to 9/11/010 picture, can we see that? 9/11/010. This is the scene after the buildings have collapsed. These are 110-story buildings, and there's not a lot there. And let's go to the next one as well, 011. You want to describe these, Judy?
It was 012. The next one is pretty amazing because that is the intersection where that debris was falling in the video. that we watched. That first video
Zero
with
on
the debris
two.
coming down.
This is 012 now with the fire on the ground.
No, it's just paper. That's fumes off in the distance.
Yeah.
But there's just paper in that intersection. Where that guy is standing is where those big sections of building columns were landing. Were aimed to be landing, and there's no building columns there.
But of course, a lot of people have said that they're in the basement, haven't they? But if we go to 911018, can we see that one now, please? 911018, please. Here we go. And this is the basement. So that's what do you think of that, Judy?
I think it's pretty interesting. There's a guy down there wading through water. There's puddles of water in the basement.
But weren't we told that there was molten steel down there?
Yeah, right. And that particular place where that guy is standing was marked on the map as being the hottest place in all of the WTC complex, according to the the reported temperature charts. But that could not be hot if that guy is standing in water at that location.
Okay, I think we've done with that image now. Thank you. So, part of your theories about the towers is that they sort of bubble up before they collapse.
Well, that's really an observation rather than a theory.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, so why don't we look at, again, as you say, it's an observation. Why don't we look at 911034? Oh no, that's the wrong one. That's the free fall speed, isn't it? That picture. We don't want that one. We want 911034, please. That's the one. Judy, do you want to describe this for us?
The building, the image on the left, I call it the bubbler because it looks like a drinking fountain, which in the Midwest we call a bubbler, where the building material is squirting up into froth and going up. That's not a collapse. The image on the right is Tower 2. Notice that about 2/3 of the building is gone. The black building in the foreground is 40 stories tall, which is approximately the height of the center of that snowball-looking dust cloud. But there's no building above that, and there's no debris below that. So, as this thing is supposedly coming down, where is the building? 2/3 is missing.
Okay, let me ask Andrew then. Can this not be explained by? Well, first of all, can it not be explained by jet fuel A in the planes that hit the towers? And second of all, if you reject that theory, then can it not be explained by the use of nanothermate or thermite?
No, because what you're actually seeing in that picture, if you look at it closely, is that essentially 2/3 of the building has gone. So if whoever is proposing the idea that a few thousand gallons of jet fuel can make 2/3 of a 110-story building disappear, or that some type of explosives can make 2/3 of a building disappear without any bright flashes, without any loud, huge explosive sounds, and without any heat.
Well, there's a famous film of the fireman saying it went pop, 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 pop.
Well, that's just somebody actually saying that's what happened. If you actually look at the pictures and look at the video record, yes, we do see some of these squibs coming out, but then if you analyse and study the evidence, you can see that there is another explanation for these squib effects than explosives actually being detonated, because the explosive being detonated does not tie up with the other evidence. We hear witnesses telling of explosive sounds, right, but they don't say they saw a bomb. And they also don't see these explosions actually happening as the towers are actually coming down.
OK, well, we're getting lots of texts in. Let me read out a couple of texts. Andy in Leicester says, how do you explain the glowing angled cuts on the central columns? Also, the nanothermite chips in the dust. Judy, do you want to answer that one?
About the nanothermite or nanothermate, I forget what it's called nowadays. It's had various names over time. It's kind of morphed. And thermite, super thermite, spray-on thermite, nano-enhanced thermite, whatever it is. The latest has been thermitic material. Well, thermitic material, main ingredients of thermite are aluminum powder and iron oxide.
Which is rust, isn't it?
Right, and the building is a steel structure with aluminum cladding that was turned to nanodust. So if you have nanodust, if the building's turned into nanodust, you better have aluminum powder and iron oxide in that dust, or else there's some mighty big explaining to do.
Okay, actually, this is a question I've got for you. We will talk about the planes hitting the buildings in a minute, but the outside of the buildings, as I understand them, and correct me if I'm wrong, were steel columns covered with aluminium columns. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
It's like a steel column with aluminum tinfoil over it.
Right, so they looked how they looked, which was sort of decorative, but they were still nonetheless steel.
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. So let me see if I can read a couple of...
I think it's interesting that the first text we got was about thermite.
Well, I think a lot of people are.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
they've made their choice,
yeah, they have.
Andrew, and it's kind of like it's difficult for people, isn't it? Well, you come along and
just to mention, I had to make a special blog about thermite. It's called 911thermite3.blogspot.com. If people want to go and look at that blog at some other point, then they will find the evidence as to why it could not have been thermite that did anything important.
All right, TV Mad Max in Derby, I think it was Mad Max in Derby, says, why was the dust radioactive, was it?
The dust wasn't radioactive to my understanding. There are some traces of tritium. Dr. Wood may be able to elaborate on that slightly with the tritium.
Dr. Wood, was there radioactive material in the dust?
Not that I know of, and the small amounts of tritium that were measured, they're above normal, but they're not like a zillion times above it, which is what you would expect with a nuke.
Is tritium found in things like computer monitors and things like that?
It's also found with reactions of cold fusion.
Cell fusion?
Cold fusion.
Cold fusion.
Cold fusion, yeah.
This is another...
The radioactive, there may have been some radioactivity from smoke detectors, because smoke detectors do have a radioactive source in them to make them work. It's called americium or americium. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Okay. So there may have been, because of the number of smoke detectors in the building, there may have been.
Of course, they're all radioactive, aren't they?
Yes. So that may be a bit, but there is no, there's no recognised large radioactive hazard in the dust that I'm aware of. That's never been documented anywhere to my knowledge.
Okay. So your entire premise then is that the buildings were turned entirely to dust. Does that include Building 7?
I don't see entirely. You can see the lower columns from the 18th story on down, there are some. So it isn't 100% turned to dust. But the majority of it did turn to dust. And this isn't really a premise. This is what the evidence shows. And like for example, the seismic signal, I've got an echo, it's hard to talk over. The seismic signal was not consistent with a 102-story building slamming to the ground, but it's consistent with 18 stories, the lower 18 stories falling to the ground. But Building 7 is the most telling, which I thought was pretty interesting that NIST promoted a false choice, either thermite or bombs in the building or thermal expansion, their official story. Everything was set up for that either or choice. But the argument that NIST used to discount bombs in the building also discounts their explanation. They said that video cameras set up north of Building 7 recorded low-level conversations down the street. They heard no loud noises. They heard no loud noises with 47-story building crashed to the ground a block away, what's wrong with this picture? And if you examine the seismic signal, it wasn't really distinguishable significantly above background noise. It was basically the seismic signal you would get with a jackhammer, not a 47-story building.
Okay. We seem to be having a few issues with your voice.
The audio quality.
The audio quality, yes. I don't know whether you're too close to the mic or we have some...
I think it's a bandwidth problem on the Skype by the sounds of it.
Is it bandwidth?
Sounds like there's other traffic on the link or something at her end.
Okay, well, I'm going to stick with Andrew for a few minutes and then we'll come back to you, Judy, if I may.
Should I reconnect?
That's much better.
Oh, that's better now. That's fantastic now. That's much better. Let's get you back.
Okay.
Let's get you back then. I wanted to ask you, I wasn't quite clear what you said about Building 7. Are you saying that Building 7 was hit by a directed energy weapon and came down in the same way as Towers 1 and 2?
Let me define what I consider directed energy weapon. Energy that is directed and used as a weapon. It's not kinetic energy, such as a bomb or a missile, that's a kinetic energy device. A directed energy device uses an energy source of some type. And I believe it was, and all the evidence points to field effects and interference within the field. It's not like the derogatory statements made about my research as laser beams from outer space. No, it's field effects. It's energy fields. And it has a totally different signature than a kinetic energy device.
But are you saying that Building 7 was brought down by the same methods that you're saying Buildings 1 and 2 were brought down? I still don't think I got an answer for that.
Yes.
You are?
Yes, and even more so with Building 7. Building 7 shows it beyond any doubt whatsoever, clear as a bell. Pun intended. If you have a 47-story building slammed to the ground that doesn't have a corresponding seismic signal, what does that tell you?
That it's not hitting the ground, I suppose.
Exactly. If you had bombs in the building, controlled demolition, whatever you want to call it, or this explanation, which is thermal expansion, you have all this material that must slam to the ground. There's no evidence that material slammed to the ground.
Okay, I've got another text here which I think is worth reading out. Chaz in Nottingham says, isn't this just a distraction just to get the 9/11 truth movement arguing amongst themselves?
If I can...
I'm not part of the truth movement.
Really?
I'm just a researcher who looks at the evidence, independent of what other people think.
Okay.
I'm into the truth. I'm not into a popularity contest.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think we haven't got very long before the break. We'll come back and we'll look at some pictures of the site taken from above, which I think are quite interesting as well. But in the last sort of half a minute or so, Andrew, do you just want to talk a bit more about how the building collapsed and what actually happened? I mean, did it just blow away?
Well, I mean, basically, again, you just look at the pictures and you can see that it turned to dust. And you see, if you look at one of the main pictures, is the one where you look down the street and you see a carpet of dust littered with bits of paper. So again, if we've got hot explosions, then why have you got all this unburned paper? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's quite, I mean, the whole buildings were full of paper, obviously, weren't they?
But, if it was burned down with jet fuel or with explosions, then why is that paper not ash?
And it seemed like everything else was
Everything else was dust.
I remember seeing an interview at the time, and one of the rescue workers was saying that the largest thing he'd found was half a telephone keypad.
Yes,
with half the number buttons on it, and that was the biggest thing he'd found in the whole site. But we are going for a break now. If you'd like to text in your questions or comments for Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood, please do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE, and then your text. See you back here soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest in the studio, Andrew Johnson, and on Skype video from somewhere in the southern states of America, Dr. Judy Wood. I thought we'd go and have a look at some images. If we can go to 9/11/013, please. Okay, this is the holes left at the end of the collapse of the Twin Towers. Judy, if you're there, could you describe these for us, please?
Well, they're circular holes, and they're very regular in shape. In the upper right-hand corner of the image is Building 6. Just to the left of it should be a 110-story building, but you don't see any other debris around there. But you see in Building 6, it looks like multiple cylindrical holes have coalesced into one big void in the building. And scaling it, they're approximately 24 feet in diameter, multiple holes. And you start looking all around the site, and you will see holes in the street, holes in other buildings, and a building that's sawed off and missing.
Oh, you seem to have disappeared. Let's go to the next picture. Let's go to 014. Okay. Andrew, do you want to pick up on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, you can see the circular holes in the building here, and as I think Judy said, you can see a void inside the building. I mean, again, if you actually look at that picture, you have to say, well, if something fell on top of this to make the hole, then why isn't that at the bottom of the hole? And well, you can see in relation to the actual contents of the building, there's virtually nothing in that void.
Well, let's look at the next picture then. Let's look at number 015. And this is looking inside World Trade Center number 6, and it's an 8-story hole.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically straight down.
Where are the remains, it says, and I suppose we all ought to ask that question, where are the remains?
Yeah, you're at ground level where that picture was taken.
You can count up 8 stories.
So your thesis, if you like, on this then, Judy, is that, once again, this is direct evidence of the disappearance of the materials. Is this correct?
We don't find the material here, so whatever explanation you come up with must incorporate that piece of evidence.
And presumably this photograph was taken very shortly after the collapse, and it's not, you know, weeks later or something.
After the disappearance of the towers. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the next picture, number 16, please, can we? Okay, this is this is World Trade Center 6 again. And the thing at the top of the screen, Judy, is that one of the side walls of one of the Twin Towers?
In the lower part of the screen, you see, I call them wheat checks, those outer prefab structures. You just see the outer wall remaining, and that's it.
So wheat checks is what? Is that some kind of breakfast cereal in America?
It looks like the breakfast cereal, the outer column.
Yeah, I think we have them knitted by nanas. I think they're called shreddies in the UK, but okay, well, you wouldn't know that, of course. But okay, so that's what you...
The building was shredded.
I think no one can argue with that. The building was certainly shredded. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is number 17. Can we? This is an interesting shot. Andrew, do you want to tell us about this?
Well, I think really, again, you have to look at the devastation here and consider it how severe the devastation is. And again, you can see just above the sort of the green dome, you can see the...
Which looks immaculate, by the way, doesn't it?
The green dome is untouched. So if a nuclear bomb had gone off, as some people claim, then why is the dome in pristine condition? You know, if you had these huge fires and explosions, you'd expect some sort of debris to go onto the dome and damage that. But again, if you look at the actual outer walls of the World Trade Center there, you know, where's the rest of the building, and how come you've just got those outer sections standing? Why haven't they been destroyed by whatever process destroyed the buildings as well?
Okay. All right. Let me read out a couple of texts. Pat from Ivy Bridge says, where would the energy have been directed from? Judy, where would it have come from, the energy? Would it be from space? Would it be from an aeroplane flying above? Would it be from another building, Building 7 perhaps? And then it was sort of turned on itself in a building suicide?
I haven't focused on where it comes from. I've been focusing on the evidence and what the evidence says. And it isn't again, I'm not proposing at all a ray beam from outer space. That is not what this is about. This is about an energy field, an interference of energy fields.
But if you're looking at those holes that we saw pictures of just now, they look like they're vertical. So doesn't that suggest, rather overwhelmingly, that either the energy weapon was underneath the buildings, pointing up, or above the buildings, pointing down, in which case, you know, I know people have suggested it might be something to do with HARP, which is the High Altitude Auroral Research Project, isn't it, in Alaska, which is a sort of thing that messes with the ionosphere. Is it HARP? Is it a satellite-based weapon?
I don't assign a name brand to anything. That's why I come up with my own vocabulary, because it avoids biasing our observations. I don't personally know what HARP is. I only know what they tell us it is. So to say it's HARP is just a shooting in the dark. It doesn't define what it is that occurred.
But
And it's like it's like playing a multiple choice test. If you don't know what the answer is, how do you know you're given the right choices?
Okay, but you have nonetheless made a connection with a weather event, haven't you? And HARP, a lot of people have said that HARP is a weather modification tool. And you have made a link with Hurricane Erin, haven't you? Do you want to tell us about Hurricane Erin? I'm trying to find the images here.
Yeah.
Got a lot of images.
There are a lot of images.
Can we...
If I could just say while you were doing that...
95. 95 is a good one to start with.
Yeah, 95. Image 95. Can we see that one?
I was studying the fumes. I'm not going to call it smoke. I'm not going to call it dust. I'm just calling it fumes. The fumes that were emerging from lower Manhattan. And if you notice in this picture, you have white-colored fumes headed south, which is to the left and downward in the image. And then you have blackish fumes going west.
Which is presumably smoke, is it? The black fumes are smoke?
I'm just calling it fumes. Just, different colored fumes. So they're obviously different procedures, different events, different processes.
Could it not be that the black, what appears to be black fumes, is just the shadow of the white fumes?
Not by the way it's moving around.
Okay. All right.
It's above the ground level.
Well, let's go to the next image. Let's go to 96.
Yeah. So I was wanting to follow those up in the upper atmosphere. So I went looking for weather images, satellite images, and I came upon this image. And went, wait a minute, what is this doing there? If you notice, just to the left of this hurricane, you see Cape Cod. And you notice a little bit further to the left, there's Long Island. So this thing was right off the end of Long Island, and the outer bands of the hurricane were right over Cape Cod.
And this is, Cape Cod is Massachusetts, isn't it? So it's just north of New York.
Yes, north and east. But you can see the outer cloud bands right on the tip of Long Island.
What's the connection with Hurricane Erin and what happened on 9/11, apart from it's very weird that nobody seems to talk about it and no one seems to know it was happening? What is the connection?
Again, I just look at evidence and see where the evidence falls. And you recall that I saw a lot of similarities, well, a one-to-one correlation with the evidence in New York City with the same thing with the Hutchison effect.
Let's look at the next image then, can we? The 97.
Okay.
Here we go. This is the early morning weather forecast on 9/11 on CBS. And your text there says, "Where is Erin?" It does seem extraordinary that there's no mention of the hurricane.
At least they say rough seas. ABC did not even say anything about rough seas or anything. They, weather couldn't be better.
It's very. I mean, I was in New York once, actually in a hurricane that hit New York, and they evacuated downtown. They actually evacuated the World Trade Center, and there was no vehicles on the road at all, apart from a few very brave cabs and police cars and fire engines. Nobody else, and things were falling off buildings. The whole front of a theatre came off in Times Square when I was there, which was pretty scary.
And notice it's not, the concern wouldn't be that Hurricane Erin was going to move over on top of Manhattan, but if it stalled out where it is, you have storm surges, and Manhattan is at sea level.
Okay, let's have a look at the next one as well, 98. And here's another one with no mention of the hurricane, which we've seen in that picture, and that satellite picture was...
I'll just point out with that image, there are some circles that I put on there.
That's your circle?
Where it should be, yes. That wasn't on the original picture.
Okay, you've put that on there.
That's where it should have been.
It shows that patch of the ocean where the hurricane is, the patch of the ocean is visible in this map, but they chose not to put the hurricane icon on the map.
Because they talk about hurricanes all the time when they happen, don't they? Let's look at the next one. Let's look at 99. Here we go. This is a satellite image of... It looks like a big hurricane to me. I don't know. I mean, I'm not much of an expert on hurricanes, but... Andrew?
And it covers the whole eastern seaboard.
Yes, and I mean, we have got a clip, not in the programme, but taken from the International Space Station, where Frank Culbertson is describing the scene, actually, of the, fumes rising from the remains of the Twin Towers. And then he says, I'm looking up and down the East Coast to see if I can see anything else. And he doesn't even mention the hurricane, even though it must be well within his camera shot, because it's only, a few degrees off the actual shot he's looking at.
All right, let's look at number 99. No, sorry, that is not. Let's look at 100, please. Judy, do you want to talk about this path of the hurricane?
The hurricane aimed for 4 days directly towards New York City. It
is that long diagonal line?
Right. It passed Bermuda and it revved up to a Category 3. That's the orange patch, the orange zone. And at 8 a.m., it was probably the closest to New York City, and it stopped, like it pulled up to a chalk line, turned around, and kind of made a U-turn, a 110-degree turn, and went east out of town that afternoon.
Well, okay.
Right.
I mean, are you actually saying then that? I mean, I know you keep saying that you're presenting the evidence and so on, but are you strongly suggesting that there is actually a link between this hurricane and the fact that people didn't talk about it as well, and what happened on 9/11?
I started looking at, okay, what do hurricanes do? And if you look at the next slide, number 101, you will see what the weather reports were at the 3 major airports surrounding Manhattan. They each reported thunder. Thunder at each of those 3 airports. Why is that significant? Thunder is what you get ahead of a storm system, because the electric potential difference between the clouds and the ground. People feel a storm coming. A lot of people with arthritis talk about knowing the storm's coming because of the way they feel. It's an electrical